Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here is your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Conservative, not bitter indeed, my friends. It is an absolute pleasure to be here today. This will be day number 8 of going through what I consider to be pretty important framework or the development, the expression of a political prism through which we can see the world of politics. It gives us something, some sort of a standard, some sort of a framework or a system that we can analyze and discuss the political issues of the day. As I said, going all the way back to the first program in this series, too many people, and I know you know these folks, and some of you in the audience would say that you are these folks, or you recently were these folks. Certainly many of you are not anywhere near this, but a lot of people are very knee-jerk reaction or emotional when it comes to the issue of politics, and they don't have a standard or some sort of a guide by which to make political decisions, and these things matter tremendously. And I've gone through this over the course of the past, now counting today, 8 episodes of the Toddcast. If you want to get all the information that we've talked about, the easiest way to do that is to text the word truth to 317-785-1030. Again, text the word truth to 317-785-1030, and you'll become a free subscriber to the Inner Circle. It is totally free, and you'll get the background, the links, explanations emailed to you where you can listen to the program in its totality if you've missed it. Also get access to other articles that I don't talk about here, aren't able to get to on the program. So that's what you do. It's a pleasure to be here. Today we're going to talk about informed citizens and why liberty requires that citizens be informed and engaged. That's what I want to talk about today. My friends, do you know, though, where your money goes after you spend it? If that answer makes you cringe, it's time to check out Freedom Marketplace. We built this platform to connect conservatives like you with businesses that share your values, businesses that refuse to support leftist causes. It is totally free to use, and it's all about helping you keep your dollars aligned with your principles. Very straightforward, very simple. freedommarketplace.net. Check it out there today. It's totally free. freedommarketplace.net. Liberty and business for all, my friends. All right, so what do I want to discuss today? I mentioned off the top we want to talk about the importance of liberty. I should say the importance of being informed as citizens when it comes to liberty, having liberty in our nation. The Constitution alone cannot preserve liberty. I think we've discovered that over the course of time. The Constitution does some wonderful things. It's a fantastic document, but we have to have an engaged and an informed citizenry to make the Constitution actually go to work. If people ignore it, as they often have, if they try to replace it, if they tried to manipulate it, if they try to rewrite it, all these things have happened over the course of time. We know that it takes citizens who are responsible, who are informed, who are engaged, who understand that institutions are not enough. It turns out, shockingly, surprisingly, that it depends upon the individuals who are running said institutions. That's what matters. Having a free society, and this can be borderline terrifying, but having a free society ultimately depends upon having an informed, engaged group of responsible citizens. Yikes, that's terrifying when you think about what many Americans do today, my friends. Are they informed? Are they engaged? Are they responsible? No, not in many instances. In many instances, they're more concerned about, I don't know, who's going to win American Idol, who's the latest contestant on The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, who's going to win the Super Bowl, who's going to be the number one draft pick in the NBA. Listen, that's any of these things, it's fine to pay attention to. Well, maybe not The Bachelor or Bachelorette, but any of these things is fine to have a personal interest in. The problem occurs when these things become more important or when they accumulate. We all can't be experts in all of these things. If we are, we're probably not utilizing our time the best way possible. And so what ends up happening is we have an entertainment culture. People want it now. People want to be entertained. Of course, human nature, which we've talked about, fuels this sort of thing a lot. But so has, we've had things that have come along recently, right? Things like microwaves, fast food drive-ups, things like social media, right? If you're bored, if you've been bored for any length of time at all, you pop your cell phone out and you start scrolling through whatever social media app, or you start texting friends, or you go to a website. Again, nothing wrong necessarily with any of these things, but we've lost the ability, many have anyway, to just sit and be with your thoughts. Be alone. Be quiet. Just sit and embrace the silence, the solitude, and just dwell upon some of these important questions in life. Of course, the most important is there a creator? If so, what does he expect of me? And if he does exist, which, spoiler alert, he does, and he does have expectations, unfortunately for us, but that's just part of the story, we can't, we've all messed up. We've all fallen short of those expectations, but there is a way to be reconciled to him. Those are things that we should be thinking about. And by the way, that way to be reconciled to the creator of the universe comes through Jesus Christ. So that's the most important question to wrestle with. But also, how do we live this side of heaven? And a lot of things that we talked about on this program today, well, over the course of these last now 8 episodes, but also even before that, when you look at some of the things that we've discussed just over the course of, it'll be 11 years, my friends, that we've done this program in August. But over the course of time, just talking about these things and just developing some of these ideas, we talk about issues that matter. And it's almost as though many people don't have the capacity to have these sorts of conversations, or even just the solitude and the thinking. You know, I've shared before that I was after graduating from from college, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And I shared, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but I went through a period of time when I had no idea. And it wasn't because I was lazy and trying to find myself. I was actually, I've always been a pretty driven guy. But my first desire, at least I thought at the time, was to go into the military. I was medically disqualified from doing so. So my second option was, after college, was to go to law school. And I went to a pre-law program. I loved the larger debates and conversations we had. I loved being the guy who had to defend conservatism or even Christian values in class on a regular basis. but I realized that law school was not for me. And I didn't know what to do. And I remember I ended up on a 200-acre standard-bred horse farm. It's where I started listening to talk radio. And it was during that time there that a lot of the things that we talk about today on this program were kind of built in to my way of thinking. Some things I guess, discovered or learned or whatever through those moments of solitude. Some of them I learned by listening to the late, great Rush Limbaugh, who I listen to on a regular basis out there. But some of the things I learned just from the solitude and the thinking. There weren't smartphones in the day. In fact, I had a pager. Can you believe this? I had a pager back in the day so that so that I could be reached. Didn't know what sort of urgency there was for me to be reached back in those days, but I had a pager. But I didn't have smartphones. I didn't have social media. I had my thoughts. I had some books. I would chew on the things that I learned, the things that I'd heard on talk radio and other radio programs as well. I remember listening to programs by some great preachers like Adrian Rogers and Charles Stanley. And I remember Chuck Swindoll listening to these programs, the Bible Answer Man, Hank Hanegraaff, on and on. I listened to these programs, listened to different sorts of things, and you think and you learn. And I feel like that's lacking today. And I just think we fill the silence with some sort of noise and distraction. And at some point, that becomes a dangerous thing. And what we have today, and we had back then too, I'm not going to say that everything was perfect back in those days, but what we have today is disengagement from people. Now, in some respect, we have more engagement today than we did even 20 or 30 years ago, because you no longer have the option. It has gotten so politically intense in this country. You basically have to pick a side. You can't just sit it out. Now, some people still do, but it's becoming harder and harder. Everything, as I've said, has become political. What you eat, what you drink, what you wear, what's your favorite sport or activity, what you do for entertainment, all these things, right? And it just, everything is political. Where you work, what you do for a living, everything has become political. And there's disengagement. Sometimes people think it's too confusing. Sometimes people think it's a lost cause. Sometimes people are just distracted by the shiny objects that are out there across the fruited plain that get our attention and so forth. We also have tribal thinking. I remember, and I've shared this before, but I remember when the internet really started to get a foothold and it began to, people started looking to the internet for information. And I remember, keep in mind, I grew up in the era where the mainstream media controlled virtually everything that was discussed in coordination and collusion with the Democrat Party. They controlled what was discussed. And I thought, finally, we're going to be able to get information out to people. And we certainly have through the internet. I'm not saying that we haven't. But I didn't stop to, I guess, calculate or understand just how much propaganda, lies, deceit, self-serving interests, conspiracy theories. And yes, my friends, some conspiracy theories are true, but a lot of them serve as nothing more than entertainment because they kind of just create this sort of fantasy for us in our minds where it's almost like a movie plot or some sort of extreme just series of events that we're trying to find out who done it sort of thing. And again, I'm not poo-pooing all conspiracy theories, but you know what I mean, right? Everything on this planet is not a vast right-wing or left-wing conspiracy. And there certainly are powerful players and people who have interest. That's always been the case. But the internet has created especially algorithms on social media and so forth. It's created tribal thinking, even worse than we had previously, because it feeds you the things that you consume. It feeds you more of it. It begins to, identify that this person likes to consume CNN or Huffington Post or MoveOn.org, and they just feed you more and more of the insanity, so much so that unless you intentionally go looking for the other left-wing and incredibly crazy news out there, as we do on this program, you won't find it, because the algorithms, if you're getting your news just from social media, basically keep feeding you the things that, align with your thinking or your preferences or however you want to look at that. And so we've got tribal thinking, and then we've got this passive consumption of information. I think that this is a huge thing. I think, it's been said, and I don't know who said it. Maybe I'll look it up during the break. But it's been said that, give me, if you were given the opportunity to change the laws of a society or the music and art and culture, the safer bet to change the way of the thinking of the people is to change the art and the music and the culture and the fashion, that sort of stuff. Because the laws, my friends, the laws come from that. It's like advertising. I remember learning about, I've been in the world of marketing and advertising, and I remember hearing Rush years ago saying that advertising is basically holding up a mirror to the audience. If you hear an ad, if you see an ad, if you read something online, it's the advertiser wants to connect with you, wants to find commonality with you. They're not trying to move you. Now, sometimes you've got extreme groups that try to use advertising to shape the thinking of people, but the left hasn't had to do this. They've had entertainers in their pockets, the people who create music and influence our culture and our thinking, and the things that we consume and listen to or watch on television or online or whatever today. The things that we consume and listen to, when that filter is off. I've often said on this program, if you go up to somebody and you say, hey, I want to have a discussion about this divisive issue, and I'm going to try to change your mind on it. Well, what you've unintentionally done, or maybe intentionally, I don't know, but often unintentionally, what you've done is you've created a massive defense mechanism for the person that you're going to speak with, because they're coming in ready for you to try to change their mind. And of course, it's human nature to say, you're not going to change my mind on anything, right? Salespeople are trained, for example. They're trained to understand that if the prospect says something in a conversation, then it's the truth. But if the salesperson says it in the mind of the prospect, it's a lie. That's why skilled salespeople will ask a lot of questions to get basically the buyer or the prospect to say something, to say the things that naturally lead to them purchasing your product or your service or whatever. And so, but far too often when it comes to the way we think about culture, the way we think about how we live our lives, it's subtly influenced when the filter's off. I've gotten to the point now, I don't know if it's my age, if it's just my interests, but I don't listen to much. I listen to, I'll listen to maybe Pandora, find a channel that I like. I'll listen to, when I'm doing some work, classical music, or I'll listen to, there's some apps that play just kind of instrumental music in the background that's designed to help you focus and all this kind of stuff, think and relax. But I don't spend a lot of time listening to pop music. And man, oh man, if you turn it on and you haven't been listening to it, it is sometimes shocking. I read some of the lyrics of songs. I've done that a few times over the course of the history of this program, and I'm embarrassed. I gotta censor what I say to you, because these songs are it's not even provocative, just absolutely vulgar, wicked, vile, Just some terrible stuff. And that's the stuff that's fueling the subconscious of people because the defense mechanism is down. We don't have a filter up, and we're just consuming information and entertainment passively, and it is dangerous. And I say all of this to get to the bottom line here that says liberty survives only when and only if its citizens stay informed and engaged. And I would add, I bumped the microphone there, I would add one other thing to this. I would say informed and engaged, absolutely. But I would also say earnestly seeking truth. So it's not just that we want to know what's happening. It's not just what we want to stay on top of it so that we hold these jokers and clowns accountable. We also want to be in line with truth. We also, the things that we've talked about over the course of these past eight episodes now, we want to be aligned with what is actually true and good and to put first things first because that's what really matters. Liberty can survive only when citizens do this. If citizens become corrupted and evil and don't focus on first principles and things that are true, if they don't stay informed and engaged, liberty, my friends, crumbles. It absolutely has throughout history, and it can do it again. You know, it's amazing to me how some people think America could never crumble. And I think, my, oh my, you need to pick up a book and read history. I know it's always someone else's problem. It's always reading about something else that happened in a land far, far away or something many, many years ago. But my friends, those people thought the same exact things in their culture. They thought that they were that they could not fall, that they were above even a suspicion that they were going to collapse. But this has happened before and it can happen again. It's a dangerous thing to play with. So, going to have to move towards our first timeout. Friends, you've worked hard, you've made smart choices. Now it's time to make sure that effort counts, not just for today, but for the future as well. Full Suite Wealth helps forward-thinking people with a coordinated approach to wealth, legacy, and legal planning, including private equity, private credit, option strategies. They'll help you see the big picture, help you plan ahead, and make your success truly matter for the people you care about the most. The goal is a plan that stands the test of time. Visit FullSuiteWealth.com for more information. That's FullSuiteWealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. Time out for me, my friends. Back in a minute. Welcome back, my friends. By the way, if you want the full story, the full scoop, all the information, the receipts, the background, everything that we discuss, including some things we don't have time to get to here on the program, sign up for the Inner Circle. It's totally free. Text the word truth if you want to do that to 317-785-1030. Again, text truth to 317-785-1030. And you'll be a member of the Inner Circle. It is absolutely free. Okay, so citizens. We're all citizens. Well, that opens up a whole other talking point here. But presumably, we're all citizens here of this great nation. And citizens matter. Republics depend, which is what we have, a constitutional republic, depends on voters, constituents. Voters choose their politicians. Voters influence policy. And of course, it's dangerous if uninformed citizens are so uninformed, so naive, or dare I say stupid. Rush used to say low information voters. But if that's prevalent in a society, people can be easily manipulated. That's why propaganda works when people cannot identify truth. I talked about truth early on, back in the first or second episode of this series. Propaganda works when people can't identify truth. It's really pretty simple if you just stop and think about it. Freedom requires responsibility. You've heard me quote Ronald Reagan on this program before. I have many candidates for my favorite Ronald Reagan quote, but in the mix, well, some of the ones I like. The 7 most terrifying words in the English language are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." I love that. I love Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. I love that. And I love this one. There's others too, but I love this one. Reagan said, "Freedom is always or only a generation away from extinction." Now I'm paraphrasing here, but you don't pass along, we as Americans do not pass along in our bloodstream through our DNA to the next generation. We don't pass it along. They don't naturally, our children don't naturally inherit it. We have to pass that torch. That torch of liberty is burning. It's been burning brightly in this country for 250 years old. Now, it's certainly dimmed over time and all. I don't want to get into that, but it's burned brightly in comparison to how the vast majority of the world lives today. And candidly, how the vast majority of people have lived on this planet throughout the course of history. It burns brightly. And the only thing that allows it to be handed to the next generation is the previous generation, or the one that's current, I should say. The current generation has to explain it. They have to articulate it. They have to present it in such a way to the next generation that the next generation accepts it, embraces it, and prepares to do the same to the generation that follows them. That is our responsibility. Freedom requires that we take responsibility for this, and we're complacent. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm sure I've got some complacent people out there listening today. I'm sure that there are. And I'm sure if we're all being honest, we all would say at some point, I've been complacent about maybe these very things, or at least something in my life. I've been complacent. But comfort leads to disengagement. When things are easy, when we're living in a and that's what's happened. We lived in such a prosperous society for so long. We've gotten so comfortable as a people. We're so financially blessed. So we have such a high standard of living. I've tried to illustrate this. Sometimes when you have this job that I have, you try to think of as many ways as possible to communicate the message. And one of the ways I try to do it is I say, listen, just think about this for a moment. We have an entertainment culture, right? Let's take the NFL, for example. I'm a fan. I used to be a huge fan of the NFL. They've done a lot of damage to the NFL from a true football fan's perspective, but be that as it may, been a fan of the NFL. So we're already to a point where we are prosperous enough as a nation to where we can pay quite handsomely, I might add, people to be athletes full time, to where they make, on average, much, much, much more than the average American, just regular worker, average American taxpayer, to the point where they're making millions of dollars a year, many of them, most of them, in fact, in many of the major sports, or all the major sports. In some of these contracts, I think it's getting to the point, I don't know if you know this, maybe you do, but sports, the professional sports, you get paid per game. So they don't get checks. And I think this is true for all sports. I know it's true for the NFL. I'm pretty sure it's true for the NBA. I think it's true for all sports. They get paid basically, I guess, weekly during the season. And so, for example, I don't know what the highest NBA salary is. I'm going to look it up. I think it's in the 60 millions. I'm looking it up right now. Steph Curry's got to be up there. LeBron James is still up there. I don't know if he took a pay cut with some of the things. I don't know. Here we go. Steph Curry, $62.6 million for a year. Now listen to me. I'm not here to criticize that. I'm not saying he's worth that or not. That's what he's being paid. And he's being paid that because so much money pours into, he's an NBA player, a basketball player. So let's take that $62.6 million and you divide that. You just think about this. You divide 62, and I'm going here to talk about how much we've valued entertainment in this culture to where people aren't really producing anything. And I'm going to get, this isn't even, he's at least he's working on his shot. getting in shape. So if he's getting paid that over the course of 82 games, that's $763,414 per game. That's per game. A game is 48 minutes. Now, they don't play the full 48 minutes. I don't know the number of minutes Steph Curry plays, but let's say it's around 35. So if he plays 35 minutes a game, he gets $21,811 and some change for every minute he's on the basketball court. A minute, you know this. I know my wife, she'll comment, there'll be 2 minutes of a basketball game or football game, and she's like, this is going to take a half an hour. And she's not completely wrong. Sometimes that is the case. So it's not a real minute. It's a minute of competition on the court, right? And there's timeouts and fouls and everything else. So, but he's making that a minute of playing that he plays. And he's not the only. I mean, I've got the other contracts here, and Jokic makes $59 million, and Antetokounmpo makes $58.5 million. The bottom line is that's a lot of money, but it doesn't stop there. We also have people who have careers talking about the people who are entertaining us. Think about ESPN. Think about Sports Talk Radio. Again, I'm not here to criticize. More power to the people who can gain an audience, entertain people. I mean, this is 24/7 now. There are so many shows. If you turn on ESPN in the middle of the day, or ESPN 2 or 15 or whatever we're up to now, it is unbelievable. The amount of people who have podcasts and shows and radio things and all this stuff up there, and they're televised, all that. So we've got that. But not only that, we then have people, and again, you may do this, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just showing you how much interest we've paid in entertainment and how that shows that we are such a prosperous economy and country that we can have 3 layers deep of entertainment. We also have not just the athletes, not just the people who talk about the athletes. We have a whole industry called fantasy sports, where you can go and you can pretend to be a GM of a baseball, basketball, football, whatever. And there's a scoring system, and you have, again, I got no problem with it. I'm not criticizing it. But on top of that, we have people, we have programs. The sports talk stuff, there are programs devoted to talking about fantasy sports to help the people who have fantasy teams win their fantasy leagues. The point here is to say, this nation has been incredibly prosperous to the point that some people only produce things that are like 3 layers deep from just us being entertained. It's a crazy thing to think about. Anyway, have to take a break, my friends. Timeout is coming here. If you're curious, my friends, about Kratom, just trying to figure out who to trust, let me introduce you to Christopher's Organic Botanicals. I've told you a lot about them already. Family-run company. They offer natural lab-tested Kratom. No synthetic garbage that's given Kratom a bad name. That is not what they do. They provide real Kratom. It's responsibly sourced. It's tested for purity. That's who Christopher's is. That's what they're all about. They work directly with farmers in Indonesia. They follow the same traditions that have been trusted for generations. No gimmicks, no shortcuts, just a clean, honest alternative for people looking for a more natural way to support their health. If it makes sense for you, if you've done the research, if you're ready to give it a try, start with the Kratom Starter Pack. Use coupon code Todd Huff. You'll save 10%. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency, and yes, time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. You know, one of the biggest challenges that we as conservatives have is finding ways to ensure our values align with the way that we live our lives. That includes how we invest our money. The team at 48 Financial is doing something I think is really fascinating and really good. They specialize in biblically responsible investing. They screen out companies that don't align with your faith and your values. That means that you're not funding things that go against what you believe in. They do all the work for you. You don't have to sit there and analyze the company. You simply tell them your values, and then they show you, first of all, you do this assessment, and they show you what degree to what degree, whether 100%, 50%, or 0%, your investments are in alignment with your values. And all you have to do is take an assessment that you can find at 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd. That's where you can take the assessment. It's quick. It's easy. I've taken it. You can too. 48 Financial, because your money should work for your values. And friends, it certainly should not work against your values. Okay, so we talked about complacency. We talked about how complacency is a problem in this country. Comfort leads to us being disengaged. People stop paying attention. And I used some examples. I talked about entertainment and how we have layers upon layers of entertainment in this culture. In fact, for some people, I don't know if people think about it this way, but worshiping something is when we consider it to be ultimately worthy, the pinnacle of creation, the thing that we ultimately submit everything to. And a lot of people worship entertainment. Government, because of all this distraction, because of all this stuff going on, the confusion, the lack of interest and everything else, government can expand quietly. That's what's interesting to me. The government has been expanding for the past 50 plus years, and no one said anything about it until Trump came along. Now, you and I did, but I mean in the world of politics. Now we've got common, average, everyday Americans who are, 100% on board with Trump and draining the swamp and all that sort of stuff because he's helped expose it. They've seen it for what it is. There's no more, you can still be distracted, but you can't, it's hard to avoid it anymore. Trump and the hatred that exists for Trump on the other side of the aisle makes this virtually impossible. Again, you can be complacent and not paying attention to some things while at the same time seeing it. You can't avoid it like you could even 10 years ago. Liberty erodes gradually. This is what it needs. It needs conditions to where people are satisfied and disengaged, because it doesn't just go away suddenly. Not in the vast majority of instances. It erodes gradually over time. And so our culture, my friends, our culture needs to be focused on making sure not just that we have a civic understanding, because our culture should be thinking about the family. We as individual people should be thinking about the family. We should be thinking about faith and our what we worship, because we all worship something. We should be thinking about education, what we're teaching the next generation, what we're teaching them to be true, what we're teaching them is a fairy tale or false, and that sort of stuff. And then also that civic understanding. These are the things that we should be very, very interested in doing. Our culture will either sustain freedom or it will allow freedom to erode over the course of time. We can't simply trust institutions. We can't simply say, oh, well, that's been written in the Constitution. You can't. Again, I'm not minimizing. The Constitution should be really highly respected and highly regarded. I don't mean to say bad things about the Constitution. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if we simply just think that the Constitution by itself is going to help us withstand the test of time, it certainly can help, because it puts ideas into writing. But we've seen repeatedly how those ideas are misrepresented, how people don't read those words. How many people have sat down and read the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers? Many people haven't done that. And they matter. These things matter. Again, our culture will sustain freedom, not the institutions. We have to hold the institutions accountable. We have to hold the people who run the institutions accountable. And if we don't know what they should be doing, if we don't know the role of government, if we don't know the nature of truth, if we don't know that we're being subjected to propaganda, if we don't know human nature, all things, by the way, that we've talked about over the course of this series here, over the past now 8 episodes, as I glance down and realize we're running out of time here for this segment. But that's what we have to do. That's our role. That's what we're doing on here. I know many of you are doing the same things in your circles of influence as well, and that's what we need. Friends, if you want to get all the information about this series and whatever else we talk about next on this program, text the word truth to 317-785-1030. Again, text truth to 317-785-1030. I appreciate you joining us. You can also text your thoughts and questions and opinions there as well. But I got to go. Have a great day. SDG.